Something inside you has already noticed it. That strange pull that won't let you look away. You could stop this now, but you don't. Because somewhere behind your thoughts, something is watching you watch. It's not curiosity, it's memory, a faint recognition of what you've always known but forgot. In this instant, awareness is observing itself through your eyes. That's why you're still here. Not trapped, but called. Because the one who is watching isn't inside the screen at all. It's the consciousness behind it, waiting for you to remember that it has always been you. For decades, the scientific world has been certain of one thing. The brain commands and consciousness obeys. Electrodes, scanners, and neural maps were supposed to reveal the exact moment when you decide something, a measurable spark that could prove your autonomy. But then, something unexpected happened. In laboratories around the world, researchers began to notice a delay. The brain's motor regions lit up before the participant became aware of making any choice. A hand would start to move, a button would be pressed, and only a fraction of a second later would the person report, "Now I decided." That small fraction of a second changed everything. Because if the decision starts before awareness, what or who is making it? The initial reaction was denial. Scientists thought it was noise in the data, or an artifact of measurement. But the pattern repeated itself again and again. The signal was real, the implication uncomfortable. The conscious I may not be the author of its own actions, but the witness of a process already underway. Imagine a conductor standing before an orchestra, believing every note follows the movement of his baton, only to realize the music had already begun before his hand rose. That's what those experiments suggested. Consciousness might not be leading the body, it might be catching up with it. Yet even that explanation feels incomplete, because something in you feels like a decision maker. There is a sense of presence behind every choice, an inner light that watches, assesses, and somehow knows. Science can measure neurons firing, but it can't find that watcher. It can only find its footprints. In one experiment, a subject's brain was monitored as they chose between pressing two buttons. The brain's readiness potential, that silent pre-decision activity, appeared nearly a full second before the subject claimed to have made their choice. But here's the twist. When asked to change their mind at the last possible instant, they could. The readiness signal had already formed, yet consciousness intervened. The orchestra was playing on its own, yes, but the conductor could still alter the final note. This paradox unsettled the entire framework. It meant that consciousness might not start the process, but it can redirect it. It doesn't need to be first, it only needs to be aware. Now pause for a moment and notice something subtle in yourself. When you decide to move your hand, when you even think about moving it, can you sense a faint ripple before the movement happens, a kind of premonition in the body? That shimmer between thought and action is the same mystery that confused the scientists. It's the meeting point between the measurable and the invisible. This is where the scientific lens begins to tremble, because every attempt to observe consciousness transforms it. The observer becomes the observed. Instruments can detect electrical signals, but they can't detect attention. The very act that gives meaning to what's observed. Here, physics quietly enters the conversation. When quantum experiments show particles behaving differently when watched, most call it the observer effect. But perhaps what we call observation is the physical shadow of awareness itself. Consciousness doesn't merely look, it participates. And once that participation is acknowledged, the boundary between science and subject dissolves. Think of it as a hidden duet. The body plays its automatic patterns, heartbeats, impulses, micro-movements, while consciousness listens, adjusts, and subtly tunes the rhythm. They are not enemies, they are entangled partners. The brain is the instrument, but consciousness is the resonance filling the room. At this point, many researchers step back, uncomfortable with words like presence or awareness. They prefer the safety of data. But you don't need to be a scientist to notice what happens when you pay full attention to an experience. The moment you become utterly aware of a sound, a breath, or a thought, it changes. The automatic becomes intentional. The unconscious turns lucid. So perhaps science hasn't stumbled. It has simply arrived at the threshold it cannot cross with tools alone. To measure consciousness is to miss it, because consciousness is the space in which measurement occurs. And if that is true, then the findings in the lab were not errors but invitations. They whisper, you are more than your neural timing. Something within you precedes the decision, observes it, and still allows for change. Let this question linger as you breathe. If the brain moves before you decide, but you can still alter the movement, where does that freedom come from? What dimension allows awareness to rewrite the script mid-action? There is no formula for this answer, only direct noticing. The kind of noticing that turns silence into revelation. Because the instant you see that thought, impulse, and awareness coexist, yet are not the same, something shifts inside you. The authority you once gave to logic alone begins to tremble. The intellect, proud of its speed, finally bows to the stillness that watches it. And from that stillness, another question begins to rise, not from curiosity, but from recognition. If thinking is not what makes me conscious, then who is the one observing the thought? That question leads naturally, almost inevitably, to the next discovery, the one that reveals the most common mistake about the mind. The greatest misunderstanding about the mind is that it creates consciousness, that awareness is born from thought, as if your sense of being alive were just a byproduct of neurons talking to each other. But look closely, and the illusion begins to crack. Thought is not the source of awareness. It is a ripple within it. Like waves rising on the surface of a vast ocean, thoughts appear and disappear, but the water beneath remains untouched. You have been taught to believe that thinking equals knowing, that the more you analyze, label, and interpret, the closer you get to truth. But have you noticed that the most profound clarity never arrives through effort? It comes in silence, in the moment when the constant narration in your head pauses and something deeper listens. That listening, that still witness behind every mental noise, is consciousness. It doesn't argue. It doesn't need to be convinced. It simply observes, and through that observation everything becomes illuminated. Try noticing it right now. You are reading these words, but simultaneously there is something in you that sees the reading happening. You can observe not only the letters, but also your own reactions, curiosity, resistance, a faint urge to interpret. If you can see your thoughts, then by definition you are not them. The observer cannot be the observed. This realization sounds simple, but it dismantles the entire structure of identity, because if you are not your thoughts, then who are you when the mind goes quiet? That question unsettles the intellect. The mind wants to name, define, categorize. But consciousness doesn't fit into a definition. It is the space in which definitions appear. For most people, this inversion feels impossible. We are so accustomed to thinking about awareness that we forget how to be aware. Thought wants to possess awareness, to turn it into an object, something it can grasp, measure, or describe. Yet awareness is not an object. It's the background that makes any object perceivable. Imagine sitting in a dark theater. The movie starts, colors and shapes flicker, stories unfold. You get absorbed, laugh, cry, react, and for a while you forget the screen. But if the light suddenly cuts off, everything vanishes except the screen itself. That screen was always there, untouched by the drama projected onto it. Your consciousness is that screen. The thoughts, emotions, and sensations are the film. Science often describes consciousness as emergent, as though the screen somehow appears after the movie starts. But how could an image arise without something to display it? Even the notion of emergence presupposes an awareness capable of perceiving change. Notice how every thought demands your attention like a child waving its arms. Look at me, I'm important. And yet, if you simply let the thought pass without feeding it, another appears, then another, each claiming to be you. But who is the one who notices their parade? The watcher never changes, while the thoughts never stop changing. This is the mistake most of humanity repeats, confusing the movement of the mind with the stillness of being. We live inside that movement as if it were the whole sky, forgetting that clouds are not the atmosphere. They're temporary expressions within it. When you identify with thought, you live in reaction. Every emotion becomes personal. Every situation feels like a threat to your sense of self. But when you rest as the observer, something remarkable happens. The same thought that once caused tension now floats by like a leaf on water. You feel the emotion, but you're not trapped in it. You experience life, but you are not consumed by it. This shift is not philosophical, it's experiential. You can sense it even in the smallest pause between thoughts, that gap where everything seems to stop for a heartbeat. In that silence, there is no judgment, no story, no me, and yet it feels more alive than anything else. Take a slow breath and notice that space. The mind will try to fill it immediately. It cannot stand not being the center. But if you resist the urge to label, you begin to perceive something astonishing. The stillness behind every mental movement. The same stillness that watches as a thought is born, travels, and dissolves. And here lies the hidden beauty of this mistake. It is necessary. The mind's confusion becomes the very path back to awareness. Because every time you mistake yourself for a thought, and then realize you are not it, consciousness awakens a little more. It's like light discovering itself through shadow. Without the noise of the mind, you would never notice the silence that holds it. Without identification, there would be no awakening from identification. So, the problem was never the thinking itself. Thought is an instrument, brilliant, creative, essential, but the moment it claims authorship of consciousness, it loses harmony. The tool forgets the hand that wields it. Now sense the quiet behind this sentence, the pause after you finish reading. That stillness isn't empty. It is full of potential, like a breath waiting to become form. Physics might describe it as the field between wave collapses. Spirituality calls it presence. But in essence, both point to the same thing, the space where awareness rests before thought arises. And from within that silent field, a question begins to form. Not from curiosity, but from recognition. If between thoughts there is a space where everything stops, what truly lives there? That is where the mind's illusion ends, and the next discovery begins, the one hidden inside the blind spot of reality itself. There is a place the mind cannot enter, a narrow slit between one thought and the next. You've been there countless times without realizing it. It happens in that fraction of a second after an exhale, before the next inhale begins. It's there when you forget what you were about to say, or when beauty catches you so off guard that your commentary dissolves. That gap, silent, dimensionless, invisible to analysis, is the blind spot of reality. The mind races to fill it, terrified of the quiet. But consciousness does not fear the pause, it lives in it. Because when the chatter stops, what remains is not absence, it's awareness itself. For centuries, both physicists and mystics have circled around this same point from different directions. In quantum mechanics, it is known as the collapse of the wave function, the moment when infinite possibilities condense into one observable reality. Before that collapse, everything exists as potential not yet formed, like a melody that hasn't chosen which note to play first. In the spiritual language of presence, this same phenomenon is called stillness. Both are describing the same field, a silent background that gives birth to every experience, then quietly receives it back. Now close your eyes for just a heartbeat and pay attention to the space behind your eyelids. What do you find there? Not darkness, not exactly. It's a kind of open awareness that doesn't have a shape. You can't point to it, but you can sense it. That is the same field where reality breathes between appearances. The blind spot exists because perception is always one step behind creation. By the time you recognize a moment, it has already passed. Your awareness keeps chasing what has already become memory. But there's an opening, a sliver of timelessness, where perception and creation meet. It's not in the past or future, it's right between them, in that pulse of pure now that cannot be named. If you watch your mind closely, you'll see how it tries to bridge that gap with noise. It rehearses conversations, replays moments, predicts outcomes, anything to avoid disappearing into the interval. Yet if you can stay with that interval just long enough, even for 2 or 3 seconds, something subtle shifts. The world feels lighter, as though a curtain has been lifted from your senses. Physicists describe this state mathematically, but it resists measurement. The act of observation itself disturbs the system, forcing the wave to choose a form. And so, even in science, the observer cannot separate themselves from what they observe. Consciousness and matter are not two. They are one continuous field seen from different angles. The blind spot of reality is not a defect. It's a doorway. Through it, awareness tastes its own origin. Every creative insight, every moment of awe or transcendence arises from this emptiness. Think of an artist staring at a blank canvas. Before the first stroke, there is hesitation, not doubt, but reverence. That pause is sacred. In that instant, infinite paintings exist in potential, and only silence knows which one will be born. What happens in that gap is not something the intellect can control. It's not a matter of technique, but of surrender. When you let go of trying to manage the moment begins to reveal itself. Reality unfolds as if it were always waiting for you to stop insisting on how it should look. You can sense this in your own body. There's a fine vibration that appears when you get close to the truth, a soft expansion in the chest, a tingling at the edges of perception. It's as if the body recognizes that it's approaching its own source. That sensation is not emotion, it's resonance. The field is tuning itself through you, but the mind, ever restless, interrupts the communion. It wants to interpret, label, define. It wants to say, "I felt peace," or "I had a spiritual experience." The moment you name it, you lose it. The wave collapses again and you're back inside the movie of thought. Yet even then the silence doesn't vanish. It simply steps into the background, waiting for you to notice it again. The blind spot is not only between thoughts, it's between all opposites, sound and silence, light and shadow, self and other. Every polarity exists only because of that hidden middle point that neither side can see. When you glimpse it, judgment dissolves. You realize that reality is not divided. Perception is. So the next time you find yourself caught in reaction, the quick tightening of the jaw, the rush of opinion, pause, even for half a second. In that pause, feel the hum beneath thought, the quiet energy that doesn't belong to time. That's the blind spot revealing itself, the same one that holds the universe together between quantum collapses. And if you listen carefully, there's something else moving inside that stillness, a subtle signal, almost physical, that runs through the body when you draw near to the truth. It's not imagination, not emotion. It's the pulse of consciousness itself, whispering through your nerves, reminding you that awareness and matter are one vibration. It is from this trembling point of contact that the next realization begins to rise, the one that reveals the signal the body emits when you approach what's real. There is a moment, fleeting, unmistakable, when the body seems to know something the mind has not yet caught up to. A tremor runs through you. The skin wakes. The breath deepens on its own. For a second, it feels as though something vast has brushed against the edge of your awareness. That is not imagination. It's the signal. The body's quiet way of saying you're getting closer. Science often tries to treat this as coincidence, a side effect of emotion or hormones. But if you observe carefully, you'll notice that this response doesn't appear with excitement or fear alone. It arrives when something true touches you, even if the truth is wordless. It can happen during a sentence you weren't expecting, a melody you can't explain, or the instant you sense you've seen something exactly as it is. The body speaks before thought does. Long before the intellect decides what something means, the nervous system registers coherence or distortion. It's not mystical, it's physics in motion. Every cell vibrates with a frequency of order or dissonance, depending on how aligned it is with what's real. When consciousness meets coherence, the body relaxes, sometimes through stillness, sometimes through electricity. The shiver, the heartbeat, the tears that come without sadness, all of them are signs that awareness has made contact with itself. Imagine truth not as a sentence, but as a resonance. When you hear it, your system aligns like a tuning fork struck by a nearby note. You don't have to think this is true. You feel it. That sensation, subtle yet undeniable, is consciousness recognizing its own reflection through matter. There's a reason ancient traditions called the body the instrument of knowing. Modern life trains us to treat it like a vehicle, something that carries us from one thought to another, but the body is far more intelligent than that. Beneath the chatter of concepts, it remains exquisitely sensitive to the field of consciousness itself. When the mind wanders too far into illusion, the body tightens, the breath shortens, the muscles prepare for battle. But when perception returns to alignment with truth, something melts open again. You've felt this alignment before, maybe standing before an ocean or looking into someone's eyes when neither of you were pretending. The body sighs, almost in relief. It doesn't need an explanation because the explanation is happening inside it. That wave of presence is the translation of awareness into biology. From a scientific perspective, this can be read through the language of coherence. The heart, for instance, generates an electromagnetic field measurable several feet beyond the body. When your emotional and mental states synchronize, the field becomes orderly, rhythmic, harmonic. This coherence affects not only your own nervous system, but the environment around you. It's as if the truth once felt begins to organize reality itself. Yet the body's signal is not always pleasant. Sometimes the vibration comes as unease, a sudden tightness, a pause before speaking, a strange pressure in the chest. Those sensations are not warnings against truth, but invitations to expand into it. The discomfort reveals resistance, the mind's attempt to maintain an illusion it can no longer sustain. If you stay with the feeling instead of fleeing it, something deeper unfolds. The recognition that what feels threatening is simply what's real, asking to be seen. Every authentic encounter with truth destabilizes the old structure before it integrates the new. The body trembles not from fear, but from recalibration. It's reconfiguring itself to hold more awareness than before. You can sense this process during moments of revelation, when you realize you've been mistaken about someone, or when a long-held story about yourself begins to dissolve. The ground shifts, but in that very shaking, the deeper ground becomes visible. Try this now. Sit quietly and recall a moment when you felt an inexplicable surge of aliveness, not excitement but recognition. Notice what happens in the body as you remember it. Perhaps the heart expands, or the spine lengthens. Perhaps the breath slows. That physiological echo is proof that truth is not a concept. It's an event that reverberates through the entire organism. The key is to stop dismissing these signals as just feelings. They are the most immediate compass you possess. The intellect can deceive itself indefinitely, but the body cannot. It's wired to detect coherence, to resonate with the frequencies that mirror the deeper order of consciousness. That's why so many decisions made from pure logic later feel hollow, while the ones that just felt right continue to unfold with ease. When you begin to trust the body's signal, life starts to shift from decision-making to recognition. You no longer choose based on preference, you listen for alignment. The truth reveals itself as sensation first, insight second. And each time you honor that signal, the communication between body and awareness grows clearer, like static fading from a radio until only the music remains. The signal is not random. It appears whenever the separation between observer and observed begins to dissolve. In that instant, the body becomes luminous, a living bridge between matter and consciousness. It is both receiver and transmitter, confirming through sensation what words could never convey. That truth is not something you find, but something that finds you when you become still enough to feel it. And as that resonance deepens, another realization starts to rise quietly from within, a realization that exposes the next illusion waiting to be seen, the belief that you are in control of any of this. You think you are choosing to stay. You tell yourself you could close this at any moment, that you are free to walk away. But look deeper. Something inside you is still reading, still listening, still wanting to know why. That subtle pull, that quiet curiosity, is not the mind's doing. It's the deeper intelligence beneath it, the same one that moves your breath and makes your heart beat without permission. Control was never yours. It was always an echo. The mind loves the idea of mastery. It believes it commands the body, dictates emotions, organizes the world. Yet if you pause long enough to watch, you'll notice that most of what happens within you occurs on its own. Thoughts appear without being summoned. Feelings rise like weather fronts across an inner sky. You do not decide to think. Thinking happens. You do not decide to feel. Feeling arrives uninvited but precise. The illusion of control begins when the ego mistakes observation for ownership. It sees a thought arise and says, "I made that." It feels an emotion and claims, "I chose this." But the truth is simpler and far more mysterious. You are the space in which both thought and emotion unfold. You don't make the wave. You notice it forming, breaking, and dissolving back into the same sea that gave birth to it. This misunderstanding runs deep because it feeds a fundamental craving, the desire to feel separate. Control gives the illusion of safety, of being the author rather than the story. But safety bought through control is fragile. The moment reality refuses to obey your script, anxiety floods in, reminding you that the script was never real. Think of the last time something went exactly as planned. The relief you felt wasn't true peace. It was temporary confirmation that the universe had, for once, followed your instructions. But real peace begins only when you realize the universe doesn't need your instructions at all. It moves with its own intelligence, and you are woven into that movement, not standing outside it. When you stop trying to steer every outcome, something astonishing happens. You begin to see that life was steering itself the entire time. Decisions still occur, actions still unfold, but they arise spontaneously, effortlessly, from a field far vaster than thought. The body moves, the mouth speaks, the path reveals itself, and afterward the mind rushes in to narrate, "I did that." Yet if you rewind the moment, you can never find the instant of actual choice. It's as if the river decided to flow, and the water later claimed credit. Try to locate the point where a decision truly begins. For example, decide to raise your hand. The intention seems immediate, but when you slow the experience down, something strange becomes clear. The movement starts before the conscious thought appears. The body initiates, and awareness simply follows. That's not a failure of free will. It's the deeper pattern of existence revealing itself. You are not the pilot. You are the sky through which the pilot dreams of flying. When this realization first dawns, it can feel disorienting. The ego resists. It whispers, "If I'm not in control, everything will fall apart." But watch closely. Surrender doesn't cause chaos. It reveals harmony. The same intelligence that makes galaxies spin also keeps your lungs expanding in the dark. The same force that orchestrates the tides is moving your bloodstream right now. The more you observe it, the more absurd control begins to look. This is not resignation, it's participation. To surrender control is not to withdraw from life, but to enter it fully, without the filter of resistance. When you stop trying to control your experience, awareness begins to notice how every moment unfolds with precise timing. Not your timing, but the timing of something deeper. You can sense this alignment physically. When the ego tightens its grip, the body contracts, shoulders lift, breath shortens, the heartbeat grows uneven. But the instant you release the need to manage what's happening, the body softens. The breath becomes spacious again. It's as if consciousness whispers through the nervous system, "You can let go now. I was never out of control." And yet, the paradox deepens. The very act of letting go cannot be forced. You cannot decide to surrender in the same way you decide to turn on a light. Surrender happens when the illusion of control becomes too heavy to maintain. It's not something you do. It's something that unfolds when doing ceases. That is why moments of crisis often feel strangely luminous. When plans collapse, when the mind's grip fails, awareness expands. There's a fleeting glimpse of the truth behind the turmoil, that what you called your life has always been living itself. In this seeing, responsibility doesn't vanish, it transforms. Actions still arise, choices still matter, but their source shifts from anxiety to alignment. You no longer act to defend an identity. You act because the movement itself demands expression. It's like music playing through you rather than you playing the music. This recognition dissolves the question of control altogether. What you thought was the captain is just another wave in the sea, and the sea doesn't need a captain to reach the shore. And yet, once this truth begins to settle, another question emerges. A quiet one, rising from the same stillness that watches it all. If observation itself changes everything, what happens when you turn that gaze inward? What shifts when the observer observes its own thoughts with total attention? Some truths don't hide in the distance, they hide in plain sight, too close to notice. You've heard the story of the observer effect, how the simple act of observation changes the behavior of particles. In quantum experiments, when no one is watching, electrons drift in probability, a wave of infinite potential. But the moment someone observes, the wave collapses into a single point, a definite state. Reality rearranges itself under the gaze of awareness. It sounds like science fiction, but it's one of the most repeated results in physics. And yet very few pause to ask the deeper question, what happens when consciousness observes itself? If observation alters the external world, what transformation occurs when the observer turns inward? That question is the threshold between theory and experience, the hidden evidence that consciousness is not a bystander, but a participant in existence. To understand it, you don't need a laboratory. You only need attention, the same precision that scientists use on particles, directed toward the field of your own awareness. When you watch a thought arise without reacting to it, you are conducting a quantum experiment within your own mind. You are both the observer and the observed, and in that instant of pure observation, something subtle happens. The thought loses solidity. It begins to dissolve, just like the wave collapsing back into the field. This is the hidden evidence. Every time you observe a mental pattern without feeding it, it changes. Observation transforms energy, whether at the scale of particles or of emotions. The proof isn't theoretical, it's visceral. You've seen it in moments when awareness breaks a habit, when simply noticing anger or fear makes it shift from storm to silence. Nothing external changes, and yet the entire experience transforms. Physicists might say that observation forces the system to choose a state. Mystics would say that awareness brings unconscious material into light. Both describe the same event, the invisible becoming visible, potential becoming form. Now look at how this plays out in your everyday life. You notice someone's tone of voice, and irritation rises. If you react instantly, the emotion becomes action. The wave collapses unconsciously. But if you simply notice the irritation without judgment, something unexpected happens. The emotion no longer commands you. It starts to unfold in slow motion. You can feel its texture, its heat, its rhythm. You see it for what it is, energy, seeking acknowledgement. In that seeing, the emotion changes. The wave has collapsed consciously. This is what consciousness has been doing since the beginning, creating form through attention. Every moment of awareness is an act of measurement, a way the infinite becomes specific. Without the observer, nothing solidifies. With the observer, everything takes shape. The universe isn't a machine running independently of you. It's a living mirror, adjusting itself according to the quality of your gaze. The more coherent your attention, the more orderly the reflection. When your awareness is fragmented, distracted, anxious, scattered, the world mirrors that chaos. But when you observe from stillness, reality responds in kind, aligning around the quiet precision of that state. This isn't magic, it's resonance. Consciousness and matter are synchronized aspects of the same field. That's why evidence of this connection has always been hidden. It's hidden not because it's secret, but because it's too intimate. You can't step outside of consciousness to measure it because you are the measuring instrument. The proof is experiential. Every shift in perception, every breath of awareness that changes your state, is a data point in the grandest experiment imaginable, the one where existence studies itself. When you begin to notice the link between attention and outcome, something remarkable unfolds. Life starts to feel interactive, as if reality were listening. You think of someone and they call. You align with a quiet certainty and doors open where none existed. Skeptical minds label it coincidence, but coincidence is simply the name we give to patterns that we haven't yet learned to read. The ancient traditions understood this long before physics caught up. They called it karma, intention, synchronicity, different languages for the same phenomenon. Attention is energy, and wherever it goes, reality reorganizes around it. Not metaphorically, but literally. The observer doesn't just influence the observed, they are entangled. You can verify this right now. Notice a single thought, perhaps one that has been repeating in you lately. Instead of following it, look directly at it, as if shining a light into its center. Stay with it. You'll notice it begins to lose weight, to blur at the edges. The more awareness you bring, the less control it has. Observation isn't passive, it's transformative, and this transformation doesn't end in the mind. It echoes through the body. When awareness stabilizes, heart rhythms synchronize, breath smooths, muscles loosen. The organism reorganizes around the clarity of perception. The evidence is written in your physiology, the shift from contraction to coherence whenever you stop identifying with the content of thought and start recognizing yourself as the space around it. That's what physics has been hinting at all along. Reality behaves differently when watched, because at the deepest level, consciousness is not inside the universe. The universe is inside consciousness. The mind, of course, struggles with that. It wants a final proof, a formula to confirm the ineffable. But the more it searches, the more it becomes the very wave it's trying to measure. The truth is self-verifying. It doesn't need to be proven, only experienced. And when you begin to taste that experience, when you sense how awareness itself shapes the world, another layer of stillness reveals itself. You start to feel a quiet invitation, one that doesn't ask for belief or effort. It only asks for noticing. Notice now, even in this breath, how something behind your thoughts remains untouched, unwavering. That stillness is not the absence of life. It is life before movement, presence before form, the silent invitation waiting for you to recognize it. Notice right now the subtle stillness behind these words. It's not the pause between sentences, nor the quiet of your surroundings. It's something deeper, a calm presence that has been here the entire time, even while your mind was busy thinking, analyzing, deciding. That stillness doesn't need your attention to exist, but it comes alive when you notice it. It is not speaking through sound, yet it is communicating constantly. That is the silent invitation. You may think of silence as absence, the opposite of sound, the empty space between thoughts. But silence is not emptiness. It's the background field where everything arises. The sounds of life come and go, but silence never leaves. Even noise exists inside it. Just as waves exist inside the ocean, thought and emotion unfold inside that underlying stillness. It's there when you're angry, when you're joyful, when you're tired. It's there in the heartbeat, in the breath, in the quiet between one blink and the next. The silent invitation doesn't arrive through effort. It doesn't demand you meditate or slow your mind or change your life. It's more subtle than that. It appears the moment you stop trying to reach it, because silence isn't something to find. It's something that reveals itself when the search pauses. When the mind drops its constant commentary, what remains isn't dull blankness. It's alert, alive, spacious, a kind of listening that includes everything. If you let yourself rest in that awareness for even a few seconds, something gentle begins to shift. The muscles soften, the breath deepens, the gaze steadies. You start to sense that the stillness is not separate from you. It is you, the part of you that doesn't come or go with emotion or thought. It's strange, isn't it? You've lived your entire life as a bundle of doing, thinking, reacting, solving, and yet, underneath it all, there has always been this quiet witness, untouched by any of it. The invitation of silence is to return to that witnessing, not as an escape from life, but as the ground of it. When you rest in this awareness, perception changes. The same sounds that used to irritate you, a distant engine, a dripping faucet, a neighbor's footsteps, now feel like instruments in a larger symphony. You begin to realize that silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of understanding. It holds everything without resistance, the way space holds every object without choosing sides. Science might call it coherence, a state in which systems fall into harmony when external noise subsides. Your nervous system knows this naturally. The moment you allow silence, the body's rhythms begin to synchronize. Heart and breath align. The brain's frequencies slow into patterns of order. Consciousness isn't withdrawing, it's tuning. But the mind resists this stillness. It says, I should be doing something. It tries to fill the quiet with ideas, plans, questions. The invitation is not to fight that impulse, but to see it. The act of seeing without reacting is itself silence in motion. Each time you notice the mind's noise and choose not to follow it, the field of awareness becomes clearer, like a lake settling after a stone has been thrown. There's a paradox here. The silence you're being invited into is not passive. It is the source of all creation. Every thought, every insight, every impulse to act emerges from it. It is the womb of reality, birthing experience moment by moment. When you align with it, life stops feeling random or chaotic. You begin to sense that everything, even the unexpected, even the painful, arises with precise timing, as if orchestrated by something infinitely intelligent. That is why mystics and physicists, artists and monks all converge on the same discovery. The deeper you enter silence, the more vivid the world becomes. Colors sharpen, sounds deepen, sensations feel more real. You realize that what you thought was dull emptiness is actually the pulse of existence itself. Silence is not withdrawal, it's expansion. Try this. Without closing your eyes or changing your posture, simply notice the stillness that holds everything you perceive right now. The words, the sounds in the room, even the faint hum of your own thinking. Don't label or analyze, just recognize that all of it is happening within something unchanging. That unchanging presence is consciousness itself, observing, allowing, knowing. And when you feel it, even for an instant, something within you recognizes it like a memory. Because it is a memory, not of the past, but of your origin, the silent field from which thought, body, and world emerge. The recognition brings an inexplicable calm, as if life itself were exhaling through you. But silence doesn't stop at serenity. It begins to reveal itself as awareness watching awareness, consciousness recognizing its own reflection. In that moment, the line between you and what you observe blurs. The invitation deepens. You realize that this stillness has never asked you to stay or to leave. It has only waited for you to notice that you never left. And as that recognition unfolds, a subtle understanding arises beneath it. That what you're touching in silence isn't just the background of your life. It's the essence of it. It's the space where everything happens, and it has been guiding you all along. From this realization, another truth begins to form softly but unmistakably. You sense that the stillness isn't trying to hold you. It's trying to return something to you. Something you forgot the moment you believed you were only a mind in a body. Something that, once seen, changes how you move through every moment that follows. And that revelation, quiet, luminous, undeniable, is waiting in the next breath. You thought this was about a video holding your attention, a clever play on psychology, a trick of narrative. But it was never the video that held you. Something inside you has been holding it. Something deeper than curiosity, deeper even than thought. The voice, the ideas, the silence between them, all of it has been a mirror reflecting the one who watches. And now, what you're beginning to sense is not an external truth being revealed, but an internal one. The awareness that you are not the listener, nor the thinker, nor the body sitting here. You are the space where all of this happens. At first, this realization feels disorienting, almost impossible. The mind resists, whispering that it cannot be so, that you are a person, an identity, a collection of memories and choices. But if you look closely, every part of that identity comes and goes. Thoughts change, feelings shift, even your sense of self transforms depending on circumstance. Yet through all those fluctuations, one thing never changes: the awareness that notices them. That awareness, the quiet field that has been observing since the first moment you were conscious, is what you have always been. It is the same awareness that looked through your eyes as a child, that listened to your first heartbreak, that watches the world now. Everything else has changed, but that still presence hasn't aged a second. You can test this. Right now, remember an old memory, a place from your childhood, the texture of light in that scene. You were smaller, the world seemed larger, and yet the sense of I am watching that moment is identical to the one watching now. It hasn't evolved or improved, it simply is. That continuity is consciousness itself, the silent witness you keep mistaking for a mind. This is the unexpected revelation. Consciousness was never inside the body. The body is inside consciousness. The same field that holds galaxies holds your heartbeat, your breath, your next thought. The boundaries you call me are temporary contours within an infinite ocean. When you stop identifying with the wave, the ocean remembers itself. That remembrance feels like coming home, but not to a place, to a state of being that has no edge. It's not mystical or abstract, it's direct experience. You feel it every time you stop arguing with what is, and suddenly everything feels vast, clear, simple. It's the sense of ease that appears when resistance falls away. Nothing external changes, yet reality softens as if existence were exhaling through you. You begin to see how much of your life has been spent defending illusions, guarding opinions, controlling outcomes, chasing validation, all to preserve a self that was never real in the first place. It's like spending years protecting a shadow from the sunlight, not realizing that the light is what you've been all along. Science, in its own way, hints at the same thing. When researchers search for the origin of consciousness, they find no fixed location in the brain. Awareness does not live in neurons, it uses them as instruments. Thought is an activity of matter, but consciousness is the canvas on which that activity appears. The wave collapses because it is being observed, not because something outside forces it to collapse. Consciousness doesn't happen inside reality. Reality happens inside consciousness. Once this truth starts to dawn, the relationship between self and world changes. You no longer move through life as a fragment, trying to manage chaos. You begin to feel that everything, from the beating of your heart to the movement of planets, is a single motion. You are not the observer separate from the scene. You are the seeing itself. This realization isn't grand or loud. It doesn't arrive with trumpets or lightning. It's quiet, almost humble. It arrives like dawn, slowly, softly, until you notice that the landscape of experience has been lit from within. The unexpected part is how ordinary it feels. You don't ascend anywhere, you land here in the simplicity of being aware. The mind tries to claim it. I understand now. But understanding belongs to the mind, and this is beyond understanding. It's not a thought to grasp, but a seeing that remains whether you think or not. When thought stops, awareness remains. When thought starts again, awareness is still there. That is the revelation, the constant that never leaves, the silent core beneath every change. And when this truth begins to settle, something beautiful happens. The world no longer feels like a collection of separate objects. Every sound, every face, every heartbeat reflects the same field of consciousness shining through different forms. Even the challenges, the pain, the uncertainty, all of it belongs to the same flow. You begin to see life not as something happening to you, but as you. From this point, compassion arises naturally. How could you harm another when you feel that you and they are expressions of the same awareness? How could you fear loss when you realize that what you are can never be lost? The body will change, the story will change, but the witness remains untouched. You thought this experience was trying to hold you, to keep your attention from drifting away, but it was only returning to you what you had forgotten, that you were never trapped inside the mind to begin with. You were never the wave trying to reach the ocean. You have always been the ocean dreaming of being a wave. And as this truth unfolds in silence, another recognition begins to shimmer on the horizon. The final one, waiting not as an ending, but as a remembering. Consciousness has never been trying to keep you here. It has only been calling you to stay until you remember who you are. Now you understand. Consciousness was never keeping you from leaving. It was calling you to stay until you remembered what you've always been, not the thinker, not the body, not the story unfolding in time, but the silent awareness that sees it all. Wherever you go next, that presence goes with you. You don't have to hold on to it. It's already holding you. If you felt something awaken while listening, even a small spark of recognition, write, "I remember," in the comments so I know you reached this moment with me. And if you want to keep exploring this kind of truth, watch one of the videos appearing on your screen right now. Each one continues this journey, not away from yourself, but deeper into the awareness that's been here all along.